Throughout history, fear has been one of the strongest tools of power. Rulers, empires, and religious institutions discovered long ago that nothing silences people more effectively than the threat of suffering. But torture was not only about punishment, it was theater. It was a performance designed to terrify, to show strength, and to remind people of who was truly in control. Behind stone walls and iron gates, in hidden dungeons and crowded public squares, human imagination created some of the darkest methods ever conceived. Today we step into that shadowed world. From the glory of Rome to the darkness of the Middle Ages, from the courts of kings to the chambers of the Inquisition, we will uncover how torture shaped not only individuals, but entire societies. The story begins with the earliest civilizations. In ancient Rome, punishment was never private. It was a public event, meant to remind citizens of the empire's authority. Crucifixion became infamous not only for its cruelty, but for its visibility. Dozens of crosses would sometimes line the roads leading into the city, each one carrying a message. This is the fate of those who resist. In Egypt, power was shown in the great courts of temples. Criminals and rebels could be beaten or forced into endless labor beneath the burning sun, watched by priests and scribes who recorded their downfall. The Babylonians, too, saw justice as spectacle. Kings delivered sentences in palace courtyards, where nobles and commoners gathered to watch. To see punishment unfold was to be reminded that law and order came from the throne, and from the gods themselves. These acts were as much about control as they were about crime. For the ancients, punishment was not hidden, it was displayed. It was meant to be seen, remembered, and feared. Centuries later, in the medieval world, cruelty became more systematic. The Middle Ages gave rise to a catalog of devices that have haunted imaginations ever since. The rack stretched prisoners until joints dislocated, a slow and excruciating way of extracting confessions. Even when not used, its presence alone could terrify the accused into speaking. The Iron Maiden, a coffin lined with spikes, became a symbol of medieval brutality. While historians debate its true use, the image of the device has survived as an icon of fear. Other tools were smaller but equally dreaded. Thumbscrews crushed fingers until bones cracked. Spiked chairs forced prisoners to remain seated in unbearable pain. Most of these punishments took place in hidden chambers beneath castles, where torchlight flickered across cold stone. The very atmosphere of these dungeons spoke of despair. Even the sound of chains clinking in the dark was enough to break the strongest will. The Middle Ages proved that fear could be engineered. It could be built, shaped, and refined into devices that still chill the imagination centuries later. As Europe entered the age of powerful kingdoms and religious dominance, torture found new purposes. It was no longer just about criminals. It became a weapon of politics and faith. The Spanish Inquisition is perhaps the most infamous example. In candlelit halls, priests interrogated accused heretics, threatening them with punishments meant to secure confession and repentance. It was less about truth and more about control, about forcing obedience to the church. Rulers, too, understood the power of fear. Kings ordered public punishments for enemies of the crown. A single noble humiliated before the court could silence an entire region. In throne rooms, political trials sometimes became stage performances. Nobles watched as enemies of the crown were punished, learning a silent lesson about loyalty. Even the common people were drawn into this theater of power. Public squares became stages where justice was displayed. Flames, ropes, and platforms turned into instruments of intimidation. This period revealed torture not just as cruelty, but as strategy. It was a tool of governance, a way to bend entire populations through fear. For ordinary people, the threat of torture was part of everyday life. In villages, stories of dungeons and chambers spread like whispers in the night. Parents told their children to behave, or the king's men might take them away. The sound of a distant scream could ripple through an entire town, reinforcing obedience without a single soldier lifting a sword. Nobles used these methods to strengthen their authority. A single public punishment could be more effective than years of negotiations or diplomacy. Fear worked faster than persuasion. Even religion was touched by it. Many believed that suffering cleansed the soul, that pain was a path to truth. This belief allowed cruelty to be justified in the name of faith. The impact was clear. Entire societies were shaped by the shadow of torture. People walked carefully, spoke cautiously, and obeyed silently. Fear became a silent law, more powerful than any written code. Not every method of punishment was famous. Some remained hidden, whispered about in fear. In ancient Persia, prisoners were confined between wooden planks and left exposed to the elements, a slow and terrifying ordeal. In Asia, sharpened bamboo shoots were said to grow upward, piercing those tied above them. Whether legend or fact, such stories spread, magnifying fear far beyond the act itself. The breaking wheel, used across Europe, displayed shattered bodies along roads and fields. Even if the punishment was rare, its memory lingered, a symbol of ultimate authority. These lesser-known methods remind us of a truth. Cruelty often wore many faces. Sometimes it was public, sometimes hidden, but it was always effective in spreading fear. The history of torture is not easy to hear. It is a story of darkness, of human imagination turned against itself. But it is also a story of change. Over time, societies began to question these practices. Philosophers, reformers, and leaders asked whether cruelty could truly deliver justice. Slowly, laws were rewritten. Punishments softened. The shadows of dungeons began to lift. Today, torture is widely condemned, yet its history remains a warning of how fear can be used to control and how authority can twist justice into oppression. The broken chains of the past remind us that progress is fragile. To protect it, we must remember the lessons of history. This was the terrifying reality of torture throughout history, not just as punishment, but as power.